So to me, it's not even a close call.
Right.
I just do what I have to do. I know I have no choice. And also, once you see behind the curtain, once you see that it's possible to heal, once you see that it's possible not to suffer, that it's possible to feel good, you have no choice. Your mind will torment you if you don't do the work, because you'll know deep down that you don't have to suffer, that you're choosing to suffer.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of I Love Being Sober. My name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people on their path to recovery. We started this show because there's so much misinformation about addiction treatment, mental illness, and recovery in general. There's so much more to recovery than just going to inpatient treatment, seeing a therapist, and going to 12-step meetings. All of those things are important, and AA saved my life. However, to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, there's a lot more to it than just stopping the drinking, stopping the drugs, stopping the sex addiction, or stopping any addictive behavior for that matter. To live a new life, a person needs new, healthy lifestyle habits, amongst other things. And this includes new eating habits, new exercise habits, new sleeping habits, new hobbies, new interests, new friends. Self-care becomes a priority, and the list goes on. And those are some of the things that we talk about here on this show. And today I'm here with Shalev Amar. Shalev has been an attorney for 17 years, and he has spent thousands of hours over the last 9 years studying trauma, psychology, and healing methods. He's passionate about this topic because his family has suffered through generational cycles of trauma, and he is committed to breaking that cycle. It is his mission to teach people how to overcome their trauma so that they don't suffer and pass it on. Today, Shalev and I are going to talk about ways to process, release, and heal trauma. Shalev, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm just grateful to have you here. So, Shalev, you're an attorney, and you've been an attorney for 17 years. You own a very successful law firm here in Scottsdale. And what gives you the right to claim you are an expert on ways to process, release, and heal from trauma?
Well, basically, life is the best teacher, and I am a licensed attorney. I've been an attorney 17 years, and I can tell you I've spent more time studying trauma, psychology, neurology, anything to do with healing, processing, and releasing trauma. I've spent more time on that than I have studying the law, for whatever that's worth.
Okay. And why is that?
The reason is because I was gripped in the hell of despair, of severe generalized anxiety, massive amounts of unresolved childhood trauma that caused me all kinds of problems in my life. Failed relationships, lost opportunities, and just suffering. And I believe that trauma is actually the root of most addiction.
There's many people that believe that trauma is at the root of all addictions. And so you've been an attorney for 17 years, and you've been studying trauma and psychology and how to get through your trauma. So I guess how long have you been dealing with this trauma and this anxiety, and how has it affected you?
Well, basically my whole life.
Okay.
The more I learned about trauma, the more I realized, wow, I've been traumatized at every step of the process. Starting in utero. My mom had a very stressful pregnancy, and Gabor Mate talks about this, that trauma symptoms can start in utero, because what happens is the mom's stress hormones and neurochemicals, those go to the baby. And my mom was in a difficult relationship with my father. She was very unhappy. She had to drop out of med school. And so she was stressed immensely and very depressed during her pregnancy. So again, started in utero, then also a traumatic birth. My mom was in labor for 48 hours, had no pain medication. So while I was stuck in the birth canal, there were all kinds of stress chemicals and hormones that I was flooded with that made me have an overactive nervous system. Then in early childhood, I was taken away from my parents at just a year old, and put in these children's houses in the kibbutz where I grew up. That's like a communal farming town in Israel. They actually don't do this anymore because they realized how damaging it was to children. But I was part of this weird social experiment. And my earliest memories running around in the middle of the night trying to get home, feeling terrified, abandoned, and that I was going to, that I was left alone to die, basically. And as an adult, I know that wasn't the case. But the problem is that caused deep subconscious wiring. And then on top of that, my father had a severe BPD, and which is borderline personality disorder. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor and a raging alcoholic, and badly traumatized my father. And my father unknowingly passed that trauma on to me through his behavior. He was basically a dry drunk, all of the symptoms of an alcoholic without drinking. But he was a rageaholic. He would fly into rages all the time at little or no provocation. And, hurt people hurt people. He was traumatized as well. So that's the long and short of it. Lots of ways that I was traumatized.
Okay. So I guess what, and this might back up a little bit, what specific incident inspired you to be so passionate about teaching people how to heal from trauma? Where were you? What happened? Who were you with?
Well, look, I've been suffering most of my life, and especially most of my adult life. But what brought things to a head is I went through a very painful breakup with the mother of my child. And breakups, I always took them really hard. And the reason is because the breakups would trigger my abandonment issues from childhood. And this breakup was really bad. Um, I wouldn't say my ex had BPD, but she had aspects of it. And,
Well, BPD, bipolar disorder, or borderline personality disorder, is on a spectrum, right?
correct. It is on a spectrum. So it's a matter of degree. But there were times
Right.
when she was flying to rages and she would be very nasty to me. And that really triggered my childhood wounding. But at the end of that relationship, I gave everything that I could. And I just felt totally depleted and totally drained because nothing that I did worked. Nothing was good enough. And, and, just the breakup was very, very painful. It was the worst of all the breakups that I'd gone through, especially because, um, I thought I would spend my life with her. We had a child together. And,
Mhm.
and so I was having constant panic attacks and also lots of rumination about what I went through in the relationship. And I just reached an enough is enough point. Said, you know what? I've had it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to heal myself. And I'm not going to keep suffering through my life. I'm not going to keep having failed relationships. I'm not going to keep having panic attacks and severe anxiety mixed in with depression. I was just frankly sick and tired of suffering. And and so, out of necessity, I decided to use my skills as an attorney to study trauma and psychology and healing methods, the same way that I studied in law school to become a lawyer, and I became obsessed with it.
Okay. And so, in learning about it for yourself, you also decided that you wanted to teach others. And so, how did that come about?
Well, the more I learned about trauma, the more I started to see it everywhere. Um,
Mhm.
so many people are suffering, and again, it's on a spectrum. But I would say I would kind of apply the 80-20 rule. I mean, I haven't done any double-blind placebo studies. It's anecdotal. But from what I see, 80% of the public is at least somewhat traumatized, and some of that 80% severely traumatized, a large portion of that 80%. The 20%, I would say had kind of that idyllic childhood, the Leave It to Beaver home. I hate those people, by the way. Just kidding. I mean, it's great that they're happy and that they had a lot of love and support growing up, but that's not, at least in my mind, 80% of people. So most of us, especially in early childhood, we are much more prone to be traumatized, um, because our brains are not fully developed. We're like sponges, and there can be some very, very deep neural wiring in our early childhood. And not just that, we just don't understand. So if a parent is abusing us, we don't understand that our parent is hurt and traumatized themselves. We feel, I'm unworthy, I'm bad, I'm unlovable. Otherwise, why would I be getting abused like this? And so you blame yourself. And again, it causes very, very deep wounding and loss of self-esteem.
It makes me think about the 4 agreements. The first agreement is to be impeccable with your word, and the second agreement is to not take things personally. And I guess, and in the 4 agreements, they talk about how we're domesticated, right? And we're domesticated by our parents, and they are doing things that traumatize us, and we don't even, like, that's part of the domestication process, which we carry with us moving forward.
That's correct. And, those early years, 0 to 7, are where we're the most domesticated. We're the most socially programmed. We're the most affected by abuse. And, that's why a lot of people, even in adulthood, they don't even have necessarily specific memories, especially if they're kinesthetic, meaning that they feel more rather than see or hear as their primary mode of operating in the world. And they just don't feel good. They feel very, very anxious, really depressed. And a lot of people self-medicate, to escape the pain, basically. And self-medicating, you know oftentimes it is with drugs or alcohol, but it can be with lots of things. It can be with sex, it can be with gambling, it can be with love addiction, being in unhealthy codependent relationships. There's lots of ways that people self-medicate just to get some relief from the pain, or to escape the pain, or to have a distraction from the pain, and some temporary pleasure mixed with more pain, unfortunately, by
Yeah.
engaging in those behaviors.
Now, you said that you see trauma everywhere. You started studying it and studying the psychology of it, and you said that you started seeing trauma everywhere. And what does that look like for you? And I mean, because I don't look for it. I guess I'm not. So I'm just wondering from you, like, when you say you see it everywhere, what does that mean?
If somebody is badly traumatized, you can even see it in their face,
Okay.
and in their demeanor. Their body language can be kind of like hunched over, or it can be kind of like tight, like ready for fight, flight, or freeze.
Uh huh.
Uh, their face just, you know, if you walk around a shopping center, take a look at people's faces. You're not seeing a lot of smiles and happiness. You're
Right.
actually seeing a lot of downtrodden looks. Um, and and I believe it's because people are walking around with all kinds of unresolved trauma. Not just that. You look at politics. Look how people get worked up over politics and fly into rages about it. I think that is largely due to people being traumatized and feeling, under feeling that their values and beliefs are under attack by the other side, and that can trigger trauma, fight, flight, or freeze. If you look at how people even deal with consumer situations, like if they have a complaint about a product and they fly off the handle, that's because their trauma is triggered.
Yeah.
If you look at the divorce rate, do you think people would be fighting as much as they are and be getting divorced at the level that they are? And that's not even talking about relationships where people don't get divorced, but they're very unhappy. Do you think that people would be yelling at each other, being nasty to each other, if there wasn't trauma being triggered? And it's going back to Don Miguel Ruiz. He had another book called The Mastery of Love, which is a great book, great companion to the Four Agreements. And he talks about how we're all walking around with emotional wounds and covering our entire body, so to speak. The metaphor he uses is imagine your body is just covered in open, gaping wounds. And we want love, but the problem is anytime somebody touches that wound, it causes excruciating pain. And that's what I think is constantly happening with people emotionally. Um, Happy, well-adjusted, not non-traumatized people are not going to be flying off the handle if somebody cuts them off in traffic. Um, like I said, like the more I've studied trauma, the more I see it everywhere. I think that much of unhappiness is because people are traumatized, and that people wouldn't be getting so worked up. There wouldn't be internet trolls. They wouldn't be, getting into road rage incidents. They wouldn't be yelling at customer service reps if they weren't, again, just filled with unresolved trauma.
Right. So I've heard you talk about the different types of trauma in the past. Tell me about the different types of trauma.
Well, I would say there's basically two main types of trauma. One is the big T trauma, and then the small T trauma. Now, big T trauma, there does seem to be a lot of awareness of. For example, um, PTSD after being involved in a war, seeing your buddies blown up, um, a death of someone you're close to, um, having a friend who is murdered in front of you or commits suicide, and you walk in on the dead body, being raped or molested, being physically assaulted. Those are all big T trauma. What's less commonly understood is the small T trauma. And those are more like small cuts, emotional wounds, but they can accumulate over time. And so things like neglect, things like being yelled at by a parent or a caregiver, um, being told that you're worthless, being emotionally abused. And what people don't understand about small T trauma, not just that, let's say feeling excluded, so racism. But in any event, what people don't realize is that that small T trauma can accumulate over time. So if it's repeated day after day, month after month, year after year, that small T trauma can actually become just as severe as the big T trauma as far as symptoms that are experienced. And I think there is a lack of awareness about that, unfortunately. And that's why way more people are traumatized than they even realize themselves, because they think like, well, nobody's ever beaten me up. I was never molested. Why do I feel this way? Well,
Mm-hmm.
what was your childhood like? Were you bullied? Were your parents nasty to you? Were you yelled at all the time? Were you made the black sheep of your family? All those things can be severely traumatizing over time.
And so, what happens when the little T trauma when it accumulates?
What happens is it's just as severe as the big T trauma, and it can cause PTSD just the same, post traumatic stress disorder. PTSD from major trauma, that's normal PTSD. PTSD from smaller types of repeated trauma, that's called complex PTSD. So the symptoms are basically the same. It's just the genesis is different. And and as far as symptoms, it's basically being trapped in fight, flight, or freeze, which is an emotional hell. Um, Feeling emotionally reactive, being easily triggered, having insomnia, having difficulty breathing, having panic attacks, having severe anxiety, having depression. All of those things can be caused by accumulated small t trauma.
So tell me about the recommended process to heal from trauma, big T trauma or small T trauma. What did you
Yeah,
do?
the process is exactly the same. And, unfortunately, the way people deal with any kind of trauma, whether it be small t or big T trauma, is they self medicate with drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, shopping, you name it. And that's basically numbing symptoms. It never resolves the underlying trauma. So, to process, heal, and release the trauma, there's various methods, and the key is to be open-minded and be willing to try things, because what works amazing for one person may work for another person, but just not as well. I also think that if you have severe trauma, one method, it's highly unlikely that just one method will work. You need to stack methods and attack the problem from every angle that you can. So over the years, I've tried many, many methods. I've kind of had to beat my head against the wall, tried things that didn't work for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but over the years, I have found things that work very well. And even though, like I said, some things work better than others, I think the methods that I've found would basically work for anybody, just at varying degrees, of course. And that's why I recommend to your listeners and viewers that if they want to try some of these methods, um, just go through some trial and error, see how it makes you feel, see how it works for you, and the methods that work best for you, double down and be consistent over time with those methods. Um, and over time, heal you more and more. So, what are some of these methods? Um, Trauma release exercises, or TRE. Those are exercises that fatigue your psoas muscles. And what that does is it causes involuntary shaking. And that shaking, if you see somebody after a car accident, usually they're in the side of the road, they might be hugging themselves and kind of shaking. That's actually a good thing. That's your body's natural way of releasing trauma. If an animal's attacked, you'll see the same thing afterwards, that they'll shake it out. And so that's a way of releasing trauma from your body and your nervous system. Another method is something called network chiropractic treatments. And the name is kind of deceptive because they don't do adjustments, maybe some minor ones. It's more pressure point therapy, and that helps balance your bioenergetic field and your nervous system. And it also helps you process and release trauma. The way I would describe it is if you go through a network chiro session at a good practitioner, you feel like you've meditated for an hour combined with had an hour of massage. So your body and mind and spirit all feel relaxed. Um, Plant medicines can be effective. They're not for everyone. And, people with certain medical conditions, bipolar, for example, or certain other medical conditions, it might not be a good idea for, because it could cause the plant medicines can cause psychosis in some people and actually make the issues worse.
Mhm.
So I never recommend that anybody do that without conferring with a doctor first. And also, the fact that plant medicines are still illegal in many places. So I'm not telling anybody to break the law. If you are interested in plant medicines, I recommend conferring with a doctor and also going somewhere where it's legal, or becoming part of a government authorized study that allows you to use these substances and not get in trouble. Um, so plant medicines can be effective in both raising awareness and helping to process and release trauma. Um, the most effective method that I've ever found is something called combo. It's actually an animal medicine from the Amazon. It is currently legal, as far as I know. Hopefully, it stays that way. And what happens is you go to a shaman or a healer, and um, they will burn small little holes into your skin. They're called gates, and then they'll rub the combo on your skin, and you drink a couple of liters of water, and then pretty quickly you start feeling flushed and hot, and you get rapid heartbeat, and then you feel nauseous, and you start to purge or vomit violently. And it's very extreme. It's also the most physically demanding trauma release method that I've ever done. You typically purge anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour. And I'm talking about projectile vomit. And sometimes you could purge out of the back too. But after doing combo for a couple of days, you're out of it. And then the third day, you just wake up, and whatever your trauma level is, say it's an 8 or a 9, all of a sudden it's cut in half. It's incredible. It's the closest thing that I've found to a magic pill. But unlike a magic pill, you're going to have to pay the price to go through a very arduous physical experience. And again, combo, you need to be healthy enough to do it if you're considering it. And you must confer with a doctor to see if it's even something feasible for you. And it's something very, very difficult to go through. It's not the first thing I would recommend to someone, but I would say to anyone who's been doing the work for a while and tried various methods and feel that they're in a good place, combo can definitely get you to the next level. Now, it doesn't replace other methods, and it doesn't replace daily practices. You still have to do the work. There is no magic pill. It's a lifelong process to heal.
So when you say do the work, what does that mean?
It means lots of things. It means those other trauma release methods. I'll add a couple more. Journaling is a good way to process trauma, because writing is a psychoneural activity, and it helps you get everything out on paper. And what I recommend to your audience is don't censor yourself. You know, if you want to cuss and be as emotional as you are, like you can write it. Don't worry about your handwriting. You can just basically write in a rage, but it is a good way of to process trauma. I'd say also Wim Hof breathing method with cold exposure can be helpful. What that does is it basically spikes your adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol levels. So then those levels are lower the rest of the day, and it helps balance you out. But other practices, deep diaphragmatic breathing. It's free. Anybody can do that. Breathe in deeply through your nose for at least 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold another 4 seconds. That's called box breathing. You could also do it in 7-second increments. And there's all kinds of other breathing methods as well. They're all very useful. Then what else? Getting regular massages can help calm your nervous system. What else? Avoiding the news. If you've been traumatized and you've been through a bunch of negative stuff, why in the hell would you expose yourself to more negativity? Much of the news is out of your control anyways. There's nothing you can do about it. And so why be hearing about murders, rapes, and larcenies, and how awful society is? And you know, I'm not saying stick your head in the sand, but a lot of people, it almost becomes disaster porn. They're just watching one news show after the other. I know I've done this before. I used to be a news junkie. You're watching one show after another, getting all riled up. It's because we can be addicted to being angry. We can be addicted to being upset because it's just those emotions are familiar to us. But you're making your trauma worse by exposing yourself to the news. I'm not saying stick your head in the sand, but look, You can go online for 10 to 15 minutes and you know what's going on. You don't need hours of that stuff, especially
Right.
the ranters on political shows. Like, all they're trying to do is trigger your emotions.
Right. And you know, a lot of people are addicted to suffering, which is, it's interesting, but that's, I mean, that's kind of what that is being addicted to suffering, watching the news, watching negativity, watching and talking about the things that are negative going on in the world. And that's, it's not my experience. It's not helpful. To your point, I don't want to stick my head in the sand. However, I want to listen to things that are uplifting. I want to talk to people that are uplifting. I want to do things that make me feel good, because yeah, what I'm hearing. So first, I've heard a couple of things from you, which is that there's lots of different kinds of traumas, and a lot of times when people think about trauma, they think about divorce, they think about murder, they think about bankruptcy, they think about major car accidents, they think about these big major events. But really, it's not just the big major events, it's also the little things. Somebody cuts me off, somebody yells at me, my dog bites me, somebody else's dog bites me.
Mm.
Like, there's all of these little things. A breakup, maybe it's not a divorce, but maybe it's a breakup. Even if it's a breakup from somebody that you have dated for only a couple of months, I mean, that's still traumatic too, right? It's the little t, and it's all of those little things. And if we don't process and release, we're never going to heal. That's what I'm hearing you say. And as you're talking about all these different things, the breath work, the prayer, the meditation, the yoga, the exercise, the journaling, all of those things, that's all self-care. Those are the things that people it's part of being in recovery. Those are the types of things that we do. And service work, and getting out of myself, and realizing that, hey, my problems aren't that big of a deal. And having a morning routine, having a daily routine, and really just taking the time to process all of these little things. It's a daily routine. It's a daily process that needs to happen. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I would add to that also, nutrition is critical.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be eating a bunch of garbage and think that you're going to feel okay emotionally. You're not.
Right.
And studies that are starting to show this. There's too much sugar in the standard American diet. SAD, of course,
Right. Uh-huh.
very good acronym. Um, Preservatives, um, processed foods, those can cause all kinds of health issues. And if you don't feel physically well, do you think you're going to feel emotionally well? Um, and and so you got to have a clean diet. I'm not going to get into the diet wars about vegan, paleo, carnivore, all that. It's not about that. I think something that all diets can agree about is eat real food. Don't eat processed junk. Don't consume a bunch of high fructose corn syrup. That stuff is poison. You know what the high fructose corn syrup causes? It causes these massive insulin spikes and then crashes. It's just like what you get from doing drugs. You get these massive emotional spikes and then the crashes. Why would you eat something that mimics what drugs do? Don't do it. You got to eat clean. Besides making you look better, you'll feel better, and it will help you heal, make everything easier. You know, if you're stuffing your face with unhealthy food, that's, by the way, another addiction that people use to cope with trauma. That was my dad's addiction. He ate himself to death. He became morbidly obese, and he ultimately died of pneumonia. But he was experiencing kidney failure. He'd had a triple bypass, and food can be a way of dealing with trauma because you get comfort, a temporary feeling of comfort from eating food. And like I said, you get the insulin spikes and things of that nature. They call it comfort food for a reason. It does make you feel comfortable in the moment, but the problem is long term, it makes you feel really bad and it wrecks your health. And it makes it much, much harder to heal. And it can be a crutch. just like drugs or alcohol or sex. So yeah, diet and nutrition are critical. And what you have to do is you have to put your healing first above everything else in your life. That's why a morning routine is amazing. You start the day with self care and doing things that will help you feel better and help you heal. And you have to prioritize that above everything else, because if you don't prioritize your healing first, everything else falls apart. And not just that, even if, let's say, you're making a lot of money, um, what does all the money in the world matter if inside you're tied up in knots and you feel awful? No amount of money will fill that hole inside you. Money can give you comfort and less stress of bills and things like that, but it doesn't heal you. It could give you the means to try healing methods, and that's a good thing. But money in and of itself, it could actually backfire on you if you don't deal with your trauma, because then guess what? You can afford whatever drug you want. Guess what? You can blow out, the strip club, or get a bunch of prostitutes, or engage in other destructive behaviors, because money gives you the ability to do that. What money is neutral, and it will magnify whatever else that you're doing in your life. And so if you have addictions, the money will make those addictions worse. It's not going to help you. Like I said, unless you use that money to help you heal.
What if a person is not proactive when it comes to healing? Will they heal?
No, you have no choice. And you know what? You don't stay in the same place. You either move forwards or you move backwards. That's how it works. If I stop doing the work, if I stop doing the daily routines combined with various trauma processing, healing, and release methods that I do, I go backwards. I start to not feel well. Because one of the issues, it's kind of it's kind of like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's a condition that you have. If you've been severely traumatized, unfortunately, you are prone to being re-traumatized. And that's because you have that overactive nervous system. It's because you have that deep subconscious neural wiring. And so you have no choice. If you don't do the work, you're just going to go backwards, and you're going to start suffering again. So I used to be really resentful when I would think about it, because I felt like this is so unfair. I have to do so much just to get to baseline, just to get to normal. It's not fair. Other people, that 20% that I'm talking about, they just walk around, they're happy. They don't have to do anything. It's not fair. Right. But you know what? Life is not fair. And everybody has challenges. And the way I see it, it's kind of like a diabetic who has to take their insulin shot. Now, we could get into conversation about whether diet would make them not need the insulin shot, but that's just another form of self-care. But in any event, it's just kind of like that. You have this condition, and the same applies to addiction, and you have to do the work. You have no choice. Your other choice is a living hell. So your choice is to have some discipline and do the work, and sometimes do things when you don't feel like doing them, or to have enormous suffering and have your life fall apart. So to me, it's not even a close call. Right. I just do what I have to do. I know I have no choice. And also, once you see behind the curtain, once you see that it's possible to heal, once you see that it's possible not to suffer, that it's possible to feel good, you have no choice. Your mind will torment you if you don't do the work, because you'll know deep down that you don't have to suffer, that you're choosing to suffer.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my morning routine and the self-care, and it's like I give myself an hour in the morning before I do anything else. I have an hour of time to pray, meditate, do breath work, journal, read, do red light therapy. Like, I do all of these things, and it's like I choose to do those things, and I eat healthy, and I exercise, and I get enough sleep. There's all these things that I do, and occasionally someone will say, "Hey, I think you're very disciplined. They tell me I'm disciplined. Man, I think you're the most disciplined person that I know. And really, I don't think it's because I'm disciplined. I do the things that I do because it makes me feel good, because I want to be happy, joyous, and free. And I know that those are the things I need to do in order to have the freedom and love myself and live the life that I want to live.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like a buffet in Vegas or something like that. You don't get to eat before you pay. And,
Right.
and if you suffer from trauma, if you suffer from addiction, um, that's just the price of admission, not to suffer. You have to do the work. You can't skip
Right.
it.
Okay, is there a question that you've always wanted to be asked, but the interviewer never got around to it? And if so, what would that question be?
I think what that question would be is, and I think we kind of tapped around it a little bit, um, is maybe why do people keep repeating patterns? They should know better. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they go from one unhealthy relationship to another. It just seems to be a different person, same problems, or they just stay with a person who's not very good to them. And I think first we need to have self compassion, but what it comes down to is that there is unresolved trauma, number one. So deep down, like the law of attraction, what a lot of people don't realize is most is a big component of the law of attraction is your emotional state, your emotions. They're like a magnet that attract things into your life. And so you could think as positive as you want and have the best attitude in the world. If inside you're an emotional wreck and you're dealing with all kinds of pain, it's going to attract more of that pain into your life. And that's another reason why trauma processing, release, and healing is important. And it's also to realize that we are to have increased awareness and realize that we're basically replaying childhood patterns that we were modeled growing up. Um, the dysfunctional relationship between parents. And so subconsciously, like you don't want it consciously, but subconsciously you keep tolerating things from certain partners because that's what you saw your parents do. So it's a combination of increasing your awareness of patterns that you're just repeating like a robot. But number two, also understanding that you're going to keep attracting people and situations into your life that will cause you pain if you don't heal your pain. Your inside is reflected in your outside reality as well. They're interconnected. It's kind of like a cycle, a
Right.
self-repeating cycle or a flywheel.
Right. Right. So we're coming up on the end of the episode. Is there anything else that you would like to share about trauma and how to heal and how to process, or anything for that matter?
I would just I would urge your audience to make a commitment to themselves to heal. And look, I know it's hard. And when you're in the depths of despair and trauma, it feels almost impossible. It not almost impossible. It feels impossible. It feels like there's no hope. And the pain is so severe. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. I really don't. But to just know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And look, the time's going to pass anyways. So why not use that time to slowly uh, crawl out of that hole? And, you know, there's a story about my grandfather that's a perfect description of this. Not the alcoholic grandfather, the other grandfather on my mother's side, who was a radiologist, successful doctor. I'll just tell this story very briefly. He was riding a bike and he got run over by a big rig truck. He almost died. The doctors said he would never walk again. It was a miracle he even survived. And when he went home, he was in a wheelchair. His legs were crushed. and his wife brought out the wheelchair. He refused to take the wheelchair, and he crawled to the front door. And my oldest aunt was in the front door. She had tears streaming down her face, and she said, "Let me help you." He said, "No, I can help myself." And he dragged himself around like that for months. And then he would drag himself into the pool and just swim laps in the pool. And then slowly he was able to walk, and slowly he was able to jog. And then he started training for a marathon. And when he ran his first marathon, some of his friends were following in a car, and they were so inspired that they got out of the car and they started jogging with him. And one of his friends, who was a neurologist, said to one of my aunts, "You know, he shouldn't physically be able to do this, but the reason that he is able to do it is because of his mind. He refused to give up." And I think it's a great story for everyone. Don't give up. Crawl as long as you have to crawl. And eventually you'll be able to walk, and then you'll be able to jog, and then you'll be able to run. And you'll win that race of life. But as long as you keep going, just keep going. You'll have setbacks, but don't give up. If you have a setback, just recommit the next day and keep going. Don't beat yourself up. Be self-compassionate. You are overcoming the most difficult thing in the world to overcome. Be compassionate with yourself, but just stick with it.
Awesome. Shalev, how can people find you, or where can they find you?
The best place to find me right now, because I'm a full-time attorney, eventually, once I exit, I would like to do this kind of work full-time and just spend the rest of my life helping people figure this out and heal. But right now, I do have a YouTube channel. It's at Freedom from Trauma. Please just follow, like, and share my videos. And trying to build a following. And yeah, I put out free content just to help people. I want to increase awareness and just show people ways to heal, process, and release trauma.
Awesome. Shalev, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks everybody for listening. Our next episode is going to be with Dr. Nicole Srednicki with Ultra Healthy Human. We're going to talk about high performance health. And thanks again, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Tim.